Well, thank you very much. I look around the room and see some of my old friends here and supporters, and I'm glad about that. I've got a couple of apologies. I got one from the Mayor for North Shore at 2:45 this morning. He had something to say about the Prime Minister that I won't repeat. But he did say he would be too tired to be here tonight. I had another apology from Honi Harawira. He said it's not much about the business round table he likes, and obviously by the tirade he doesn't like my mother either. And I was very pleased to meet Dan's family here, extended family. His Auntie Betty is here, and how wonderful for Dan to catch up with Auntie Betty and family. I'm trying to convince my sister that she'd stay in New Zealand, but Tyra said that she wants to be closer to Tiger. So Tyra's not going to stay here in New Zealand. But I had the choice to make tonight. Would I be here or would I be with a Mr. Kennedy? I don't know Mr. Kennedy, but I don't think Mr. Kennedy would like me. So I'm not going to introduce Mr. Kennedy tonight, but I'm very pleased to be here with you, Dan. Very pleased. And I'm very pleased to be here with my old friend, long-time friend, Catherine. And I want to say publicly, Roger Kerr has been very generous to me over 33 years, and I really value him in the Business Round Table. I'm proud of the achievements of the Business Round Table, but you wouldn't be surprised. Now, I know my opponent wouldn't come here and say that. But I do, and I make no apology for it. When Governor Hobson arrived here, right here, on that Saturday, on the 20th of March, 1840, 350 metres from the shoreline at what is now Shortland Street, named after Willoughby Shortland, when Governor Hobson arrived here on that day after suffering 3 strokes coming down through the channel, and everyone was worried that he wouldn't survive, I wonder if Governor Hobson on that day would have contemplated that 169 years later, the place he found as the capital of the new colony was going to be the 3rd most indebted country in the world 169 years later. I really wonder if he even thought about that. I noticed yesterday, speaking at the Copenhagen Climate Conference, the former US Vice President Al Gore, who, as a matter of interest, would never vote for Banksy, he told me once, the former Prime Minister Al Gore said the Arctic could be completely ice-free in 5 years. It's much more difficult, Dan, isn't it, to manipulate financial data? If only we had the same level of concern about global debt as we do about climate change, I think the world would be a better place. Coming to grips with global debt is, in my view, very critical to our future as a global economy. We're the 3rd most indebted country in the world after Iceland and Hungary, as I said. We will borrow $245 million this week because we borrowed $245 million last week, the week before, and the week before Christmas we will still be borrowing $245 million, and we will borrow and continue to borrow $240 million a week for the next 200 weeks to balance the Crown account. But we do hear a lot about flying alternative flags on the harbour bridge, but not much about the $240 million a week that we, New Zealand Incorporated, are going to borrow from the savings of other folk in other countries to balance the Crown account. And one wonders, doesn't one, how long you can continue to borrow $240 million a week. The cost of borrowing will increase from $2.4 billion to $4.6 billion a year within 4 years. Whatever we've done to arrive in this mess, We will need to change to get us out of this mess. And doing business as usual won't get us out of this mess that we as the global community, in particular here in the Southwest Pacific, have got ourselves into. So we continue to argue over things like flying flags on harbour bridges and who sends emails in the middle of the night to the Prime Minister, but we have very little debate in the Parliament or anywhere else on the global economy. And I put it to you, most of my parliamentary colleagues wouldn't know much about the global economy or the New Zealand economy. The lack of depth of knowledge in Parliament about the New Zealand economy is a mile wide but an inch deep. I suspect Honey thinks fiscal drag's a transvestite tax collector. The future of New Zealand, indeed the social prosperity for this country, will substantially depend, Dan, on the success of this new super city we're putting in place 80 years after it was first proposed. We continue to argue over economies of scale, efficiencies and savings in having a super city. 1/3 of the economy and 40% of the population will live in the super city. We have to get the super city right, otherwise the social prosperity of this country has no future. And I know that you're going to be talking about the home country and the social prosperity for the Brits in the home country going forward, and their problems are even greater. We need to move the needle. We need to set some urgent priorities. The New Zealand economy needs brave leadership and decisive action, because I don't know how much and how long we can borrow $4.6 billion a year to pay the interest on the debt to balance the Crown account. And so I'm glad you're here to talk about these things, and I've heard many of your speeches which refer to these things. The truth is that the Arctic ice may not completely melt in the next 5 years, but the inconvenient truth is that our standard of living will melt in the next 5 years. That's the inconvenient truth. And so, which debate is more important? Which set of facts is more critical? What are we doing about it? Which brings me to our honoured guest. What are we doing about it, Dan? And welcome to Auckland. First elected to the European Parliament in 1999, and re-elected at the top of his party list for South East England constituency in 2004. Congratulations. In the first instance, he was the youngest member of the European Parliament. He's also a very fine journalist, a conservative journalist. He wouldn't get a job in the New Zealand Herald. Notwithstanding that he writes in the Wall Street Journal and the Spectator. But he's a very good journalist and writes very good stuff. In April 2008, Dan was elected to the top position of the Conservative list for the 2009 European elections in the South East England constituency, and in June 2009 he was elected to the European Parliament. We congratulate you on your successes and we wish you much success for the future. You are a role model young British leader, and here in the Southwest Pacific we are very proud of you. Keep the flag rolling and the drums beating, long and hard. We're grateful tonight to the Business Roundtable for hosting you here in the Southwest Pacific. Thank you for coming. I'm sure you've enjoyed catching up with your cousins and your aunt. I'm also sure you don't have much in common with Al Gore, but we have much in common with you. Welcome, Dan.